We're here today to discuss Battling Corruption. Has NREGA reached India's rural poor? A book co-authored by Professor Shailashri Shankar and Professor Raghav Gaya. We have with us Shailashri here today. So if you could just begin by talking to us a little bit about the book. How did this idea germinate?
Well, both Professor Raghav Gaya and I both of us have been very interested in looking at how poverty alleviation schemes work or don't work and the sorts of mechanisms that might enable it to work. There's a third person also who's involved in this project, who's Dr. Raghavendra Jha, who's at Australian National University. Now, when NREGA was first introduced as an act in 2005, and the scheme was then implemented in 2006, it was going to be implemented in about 100 phase 1 districts, who are amongst the poorest districts in India. So we thought, let's look at how this program will actually work out. And we only looked at the phase 1 districts and looked at 4 states, and we wanted to do household surveys and ethnographic surveys. I'll come to that in a little bit. And see what is it that would make a government program like NREGA, which is supposed to reach the rural poor, actually work more effectively. Because the big problem that most governments have and most policymakers have is how do you try and see that the money doesn't get eaten away along the way. So there's all this thing about trickle down effect, etc. So we wanted to actually test whether there were certain mechanisms that could transform a trickle down into actually a waterfall. Raghav and Raghavendra are economists by training, and I'm a political scientist by training. Okay. So one of the interesting things in this study is that we tried to blend econometric work with ethnographic work.
So publicly, there have been a lot of reports about corruption hampering the implementation and the effect of NREGS, and recently there has been a CAG report about the same. So I would like you to discuss how your book addresses the aspect of corruption, since it's called Battling Corruption.
So let me just explain. In NREGA, you have one portion of the funds going towards wages and another portion of the funds going towards materials to construct or to build whatever they're building. So if you have a ratio of 60% going to wages and 40% going to materials, in the materials section is where a lot of the corruption takes place. The reason being that because it's manual labor and because it does not have any permanent structures. Now the government has said it must be durable, but when the program first came out, it was not durable. It was supposed to be anything which did not involve machinery. So because of that, what you find is that it is much harder to figure out, for instance, if you've dug a ditch or if you've made a culvert. It's much harder to figure out if the culvert was actually made because the monsoons could have washed it away. And you have not used any pakka materials for any of this stuff. Or it's also much harder to figure out whether the cement that was used, for instance, was of superior quality. The books may say superior, but you may have used very inferior quality or no cement or nothing at all. So it's there that it's really hard to measure, and we found it really hard. Every NREGA beneficiary must have a bank account, and the money flows directly to the bank account, and this person gets a passbook, and then the person is supposed to get the money. But here again, there's a problem, because in the implementation side, what happens is that if you are, and remember, these are we looked at the poorest districts in India, right? So these villages have no access to banks. The banks could be 10 kilometers away. So the person who takes the passbook, which is what we found when we went to the villages, was the poor agricultural labourer told us, look, I don't go to the bank. This is my passbook. The passbook is actually, a number of them said they didn't even have the passbooks in their house. They had the passbook was with the supervisor because each work site has a supervisor. So the supervisor then takes say 10 passbooks, goes to the bank. And there's where the collusion occurs, because on the books, what happens is that you could get the 100 rupees, it says 100 rupees in the passbook. But the actual money that comes to this person is not 100 rupees. It could be 80, it could be 70, it could be, this person might have deducted some money for his going over there and then taken some more money. So given that the rural agricultural wages are 20 rupees a day, which is in Madhya Pradesh, for instance, that's what they were earning if they were to work on a farm. anything above 20 rupees for this person, this poor agricultural laborer, is a windfall. So they were willing to take whatever money that was given to them, as long as it was not less than 20 rupees. So when I was talking to one of the, I went into one of these villages in Madhya Pradesh, and we were, and I said, I just want to go to the poorest person in this village. Take me to the poorest person. So my the person who had done my interviews, who had actually been to these villages, he took me to the poorest person there. So I asked this agricultural labourer. He was lying down on this charpoy. It was very, very hot. It was in the middle of the afternoon. And I said, do you know how much you earned last year? So this chap said, well, I don't know. So I said, do you know how much you're supposed to get in Narega? So he said, I don't know, I don't know. He couldn't give me the number. So I said, don't you know how much you're supposed to earn, and don't you know how much you're supposed to get? So he said, I just take whatever they give me. So I said, don't you complain? I mean, you must have heard something. So then his wife piped up and she said, yeah, we're supposed to get 100 rupees. So he also said, yeah, 100 rupees. So I said, do you get 100 rupees? So no, we get whatever we're given. So, and then he says in Hindi, and I'll just translate it in English, he says, how can a deer put its head in the mouth of a tiger? And the tiger were the more powerful people in the village. So his whole thing was, I'm a deer, how can I go and do something like this? So I will take whatever they give me. Now this is a story that is repeated again and again in a lot of villages, and it has to do with the way the power structure works, which is also linked to the caste system, which is that the most of the 37% of Indians are poor, of which 77% live in rural areas, and of these 70 and those who live in rural areas, amongst these poor, almost 50% are among the lowest castes, so scheduled castes and scheduled tribes.
Yeah.
So, and the person I was talking to was a scheduled caste, and so it's really hard, therefore, to break this sort of a power imbalance, and so the book, therefore, then looks at the sorts of mechanisms that could actually empower. We call it the empowerment mechanism. So what sorts of mechanisms can actually change the structure of power? And it's not just changing the structure of power. Its second step is to actually use the changes and make things different for themselves, right? So even if you change the structure, if the poor people, the poorest, are not able to use it, then it doesn't matter what you do. So like the bank accounts, if a poor person cannot go to the bank and pick up the money because he does not have the wherewithal to do it, then we're still going to continue with corruption. So which is why, so when we examined it, we looked at the sorts of things that would enable, so in the wages section we looked at, did these people get the money that they were supposed to have gotten?